Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Tizengausen with you. Today is September 6th. There are a lot of important news stories. In this episode, Putin has been briefed on alarming news. The Russian economy is sliding into the abyss at an accelerated pace. Meanwhile, Trump is inviting Putin and Xi Jinping to Miami. Donald Tusk stated that Russia is preparing an attack on Poland, and during the upcoming joint Russia-Belarus exercises, which will take place in a week, very serious provocations are possible. Meanwhile, Polish citizens have been asked to immediately leave the territory of Belarus. And also, why has the Kremlin suddenly decided to build fortifications on the border with Finland? We'll be talking about this and much more in today's episode. There's a lot of interesting information ahead, so if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Disturbing news is coming out of Russia. In yesterday's episode, I told you that in Vladivostok, Putin started saying some truly astonishing things. For example, that the region is facing a gas shortage of almost 50% and that it's necessary to switch back to coal. As they say, we're going back to steamships, steam locomotives, and so on. But that's not all the news. Today, even more alarming news is coming in. During a meeting with Putin, Finance Minister Silvanov delivered what is being described here as a worrying but expected message. The country's economic growth continues to slow down. GDP growth will be less than 1.5%, even though in April the forecast was 2.5%. Well, in general, everyone got a bit concerned. So, what's happening with the Russian economy? Can you imagine what would happen to the Russian economy if Donald Trump actually imposed tough sanctions on those who buy Russian energy resources? Right? Well, for now, we can only imagine it. And so that Russians don't think their economy is a complete mess. Pardon my French. They've come up with a North Korean-style information capsule scenario for them. That is, now there will be a list of approved websites for them, where they'll be told that it's not really a mess with the economy, but actually a great success. And these latest decisions to ban foreign messengers, social networks, various platforms, and video hosting sites show that Russia is rapidly preparing for the North Korean scenario, where there will be just a few dozen approved websites, a state messenger through which the security services will extract all information about Russians, and basically a digital version of the Soviet Union, where there were 3 TV channels, a few newspapers, and everything had the right victorious narrative. And today there's news. The Ministry of Digital Development has compiled a whitelist of websites that will remain accessible if mobile internet is shut off. Well, for now, there are about 100 of these sites. Maybe the list will be expanded. That's all there is to it. That is, the head of the ministry, this Ministry of Digital Development, stated that the whitelist will include all resources necessary for life. The government will tell you which resources you need for life. I think everyone understands perfectly well where this is all heading. They'll choose a list of permitted sites, and then they'll tell Russians that they don't need mobile internet at all. After all, people used to live in the Soviet Union without the internet, and God forbid you come across some enemy ideas. Who knows what those Anglo-Saxons and Ukro-Saxons will come up with? That's why things are tightening up so quickly. They're preparing to close off the information space in order to create some kind of alternative reality that will exist inside this capsule. With victory in this war, with a new Iron Curtain and so on. Because all of them, everyone in the club of dictators and autocrats already has such a system in place. Take North Korea, for example. The Korean Central News Agency will tell you everything you need to know. In China, there's the Great Chinese Firewall, and Iran has its own version too. In Iran, there's even a special internet police force that drives around, tracks down people using Elon Musk's Starlinks, and arrests them for it. In fact, last month, Starlink was officially banned in Iran. And now there are already stories starting to appear, saying that Russians don't really need the internet anyway. I saw a segment, I think it was from some Volgograd channel, where they seriously claim that disconnecting from the internet is a great benefit. Now people will be able to spend time with friends outdoors, walk in the fresh air, and so on. In other words, they're preparing people for a North Korean scenario. Haha. Well, since we've mentioned the Central Telegraph Agency of Korea, as usual, I've brought you some fresh cringe from there. Let me remind you, this is literally the website where you can find the whole truth about Kim Jong-un, his father, his grandfather, the revolution, North Korea, and so on. So every little thing Kim Jong-un does there is described as a great victory, some kind of wisdom. For example, he asks to increase the font size on a sign, and everyone is just over the moon about how wise he is. So their segment there is called Revolutionary Episode. Alright, let me read it. This is absolutely true information. These episodes are published on this website. You can go and take a look, and there's a ton of cringe-worthy stuff there. So, the headline: Paying attention to the faint sound of the wind. Here it comes, get ready. Once in March 2017, the respected comrade Kim Jong-un inspected a 70-story building on Ryomyong Street. Comrade Kim Jong-un spent a long time inspecting the 7th and 58th floors and then went down by elevator. And in the elevator, he suddenly turned his gaze to the elevator wall. The senior officials couldn't understand what had happened, and Comrade Kim Jong-un said that when he was going down in the elevator, he heard the sound of wind, which meant that negative pressure was being created, and he ordered them to make some kind of opening so that this wind noise would disappear. Everyone was simply shocked. They had ridden that elevator hundreds of times, but had never heard that wind noise. And Comrade Kim Jong-un, with such high standards for his people, was able to notice this faint sound of wind. Just so you understand, they call it a revolutionary episode when Kim Jong-un arrives at a field and says the corn should be planted 5 centimeters farther apart from each other. And that's what he decided for some reason, I don't know why. And everyone writes it down in their notebooks and does exactly as Kim Jong-un instructed. But honestly, there's a ton of cringe-worthy stuff there. Just so you know, another revolutionary episode is called The New Design of the Work Coat. I won't read everything out to you. So Kim Jong-un arrived at a mineral water bottling plant, walked up to some worker, I think the worker died twice on the spot and came back to life, grabbed his coat and started feeling it. And then Kim Jong-un said, why is the coat such a deep blue color? He said that the color of the coat should be like the work of bottling water, light. So they changed everyone's uniforms, white on top, light blue on the bottom. A revolutionary episode. That's the kind of nonsense Kim Jong-un is up to over there. Well, if only Russia weren't helping, but as it is, Putin and him are in the same club of dictators. Anyway, they've got their own momentum going over there. In this work coat is embodied the heartfelt care of Comrade Kim Jong-un, who is making every effort to create the most cultured and civilized production environment. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I suppose I understand that politics and diplomacy require carefully chosen words, so as not to offend or insult anyone, though I'm not entirely sure that's how it should be. But why not call things by their proper names in a country where you can simply be shot for wearing jeans or watching a Western movie? An insane, completely inadequate ruler. Absolutely. By the way, it was Donald Trump who called him a great guy, a smart guy. At what point did we take the wrong turn on our civilizational path? Why is it that a maniac who holds one victim hostage gets caught and put in prison, but a maniac who holds millions, an entire nation, is called a great guy? But a maniac who kills hundreds of thousands is not called a murderer by anyone. Well, or rather, no. They ask not to call him a murderer so as not to disrupt negotiations with him. On the contrary, they take pride in having good relations with them. You know, it's no surprise that right-wing parties are gaining more and more ground in Europe now. I mean, they offer populist solutions, some quick fixes, but at least they are offering some kind of solutions. And more radical solutions. I think I would really like it if right now, at the head of one of the influential countries, there was a truly tough politician who would say, "What, don't you see? He's a psychopath and a murderer. Slap him with sanctions from head to toe. Anyone who helps him should also be immediately hit with sanctions. No deadlines, no ultimatums." He would come and unite some reasonable supporters around himself. And Europe would wake up and say, "My God, how were we able to fight evil before? And now?" Yes, the UN would be dissolved, and something effective would be created in its place. I mean, it's a disgrace when, even now, a representative of Russia speaks at the UN and claims that they haven't attacked anyone. Of course, it's sad when entire nations are held hostage by madmen. And this is happening at a time when humanity has long since flown into space. Artificial intelligence is developing, soon Mars will be colonized, and so on. And yet, at this very time, one person sends his people to war against a peaceful country, another bans certain car colors, forces everyone to read only their own books. Then there's another, let's say, group of crazies. They ban women, ban music, ban everything for women in general. Well, in general, yes. And now we have another good person showing up, at least for Donald Trump, of course. The head of Belarus is a wonderful person who has freed prisoners, said Donald Trump. I want to give credit to the leader of the country. He is a very strong person. According to him, the US and Belarus are negotiating the release of other detainees, and they may be freed soon. Listen, why don't we start thanking maniacs, for example, for killing 10 people instead of 20? They could have, you know, or for maiming people but leaving them alive. What is even going on? And Hitler, by the way, was a good person too. Interesting. He could have killed a lot more, but he wasn't allowed to. What is happening? Next. When I open the news in the morning, I think, well, there must be some kind of limit. But look, Donald Trump said he would be happy to welcome Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping at the upcoming G20 summit in Miami next year. Seriously, where are the politicians of Reagan's caliber? Where have you all disappeared to? Let's just, I don't know, convene a UN session and officially declare that there is no more evil in the world. So, the killing of hundreds of thousands of people isn't evil. The occupation of foreign territories isn't evil. Let's just admit that evil no longer exists, and then everything will be much simpler. Let me remind you that it is the heroism of our soldiers and their incredible, extraordinary strength and courage that are holding back the modern-day Hitler, Putin, and his army. So friends, I ask you to support our next fundraiser for the separate Bohdan Khmelnytsky Brigade. They are fighting and holding back the occupiers on one of the hottest fronts, the Pokrovsk direction. The vehicle we are raising funds for is truly essential for them there. So I ask you to support this fundraiser. The link to donate is in the description of this video and in the comments. There are options for private, mono, and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. I am asking you very much. And if you're not watching on my channel, here's a QR code. You can use it to go to the fundraiser. Let's help our soldiers. Your donation could save someone's life. Remember that, friends. Well, as if one enemy wasn't enough for us. Let me read you this news. The Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó responded to criticism from Ukrainian President Zelensky directed at Hungary. So he said the following. Zelensky called it strange that Hungary rejects Ukraine's membership in the European Union. After all, even Russia is not against it. Well, Zelensky is once again judging by his own standards. He emphasized the difference. The difference between Hungary and Ukraine is that Hungary does not follow orders from others, but is guided by the opinion of its own people, who are against Ukraine joining the European Union. Seriously? A lot of people from Hungary have written to me. The most common phrase in the comments, by the way, is, Orban is not Hungary. And you are absolutely right. Orban is making enormous efforts to smear Ukraine, to portray it as some kind of inadequate country with inadequate people, forgetting that, excuse my French again, it's Ukraine that's actually covering his ass right now. Who knows what will pop into Putin's head next? It's unclear where he'll decide to go after this. Although maybe Orban thought that if Putin gets there, he would somehow, well, that he would keep his position, shake some hands and so on. And that's why it's so funny when they say that Hungary doesn't take orders from anyone. Hungary may not, but its leadership certainly does. Just the other day there was news, I talked about it, about how Slovakia and Hungary are trying to lift sanctions from 6 oligarchs.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Russian oligarchs, not Hungarian, not Slovak, but Russian oligarchs. I wonder, is this really them not following anyone's orders? Why do they even care about Russian oligarchs? By the way, sanctions were also lifted from Patriarch Kirill, a deep bow from the KGB agent in a cassock, Patriarch Kirill, to Orban. Well, as for the opinion of the people of Hungary, so Orban really plastered the place with billboards, ran a massive advertising campaign to show that Ukraine shouldn't be accepted into the European Union. Believe me, he is in a panic, afraid that he'll be ousted in the elections. Hungary has elections next spring, because then investigations could be launched into all these Russian energy procurement schemes, and not just those. And there will turn out to be a lot of unpleasant things there. And so, I have a question for you, dear friends. By the way, is anyone here from Hungary? Write in the comments, how do people there feel about this pterodactyl of peace? So, Ukraine and Hungary. Ukraine, with its own people, its own heroes, sons and daughters, has shielded all of Europe and is fighting the occupier who planned to go further. Putin did not plan to stop at Ukraine, while Hungary is sabotaging key decisions of the European Union. Just one vote against all the others in the European Union. So, who is more deserving of being in the European Union? Well, here's an important clarification, really. This comment will be an important clarification. Hungary is not Orban. I very strictly and clearly separate the opinion of the ruling elite from the opinion of the people of Hungary. That's why Hungary rightfully belongs in the European Union. But the current Hungarian leadership is doing everything possible to make Hungary lose that place. And I couldn't ignore this statement either from the former president of Poland, Mr. Duda. From the very first day, Ukraine tried to drag Poland and other NATO countries into the war. Well, this was said in the context that in 2022, a missile fell on Polish territory and unfortunately 2 people died. And Duda said that at that time Zelensky called him and said, "Tell me, whose missile is it? Tell me, whose missile is it?" Basically, well, Duda is now saying this in the context that supposedly at the beginning of the invasion, the Ukrainian army was weak, and of course they wanted Putin to cause harm in some NATO country so that NATO would get involved, excuse my slang, stand up for Ukraine shoulder to shoulder. Of course we wanted that. Well, of course we wanted that. But NATO, of course, did not get involved. Even though Russian drones and missiles flew into their territory and, as we see, killed people. By the way, I remember the statement when a missile flew 40 kilometers deep into the territory and everyone was really outraged. How could this happen 40 kilometers into our country's airspace? What does Russia think it's doing? Maybe we should summon the ambassador? Maybe we should write some kind of note. Well, now let's take a look at the price you pay for ignoring Russian missiles and drones. First when they're 10 kilometers over your territory, then 40 kilometers, and for not hitting back hard at those who allow themselves to do this. After all, I want to emphasize that Europe has a unique opportunity, not to fight itself, but simply to provide Ukraine with the kind of weapons that would allow Putin to get such a musical thrashing that he'd never want to fight anyone again. So, what is the price of turning a blind eye? And by the way, why was Erdogan, for example, able to shoot down not just a missile but an entire Russian fighter jet with its pilots when it violated his airspace while others can't? So what is the price? What is the cost? Belarus and the Russian Federation are training for an attack on Poland, Donald Tusk stated, and he warned about provocations during the Zapad 2025 exercises. Well, here we are, as they say, we've played around long enough. But Tusk emphasized Poland will respond firmly to any provocations. These exercises, I remind you, will begin on September 12th, literally in a week. And on September 1st, the chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Belarus stated that during the drills, these troops will also practice simulating a nuclear strike. How wonderful everything is. Just to remind you, that's the chief of the General Staff of that wonderful person, Alexander Lukashenko. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel because it helps both with promotion and with spreading the truth. And also that a dictator and a murderer should be called a dictator and a murderer. And here's something else, by the way. The Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs has called on its citizens who are currently in Belarus to leave the country as soon as possible by any means. Take these warnings as seriously as possible, said the spokesperson for the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, adding that Polish citizens in Belarus may encounter incidents that will not be to their benefit. This statement was made public after a Polish citizen was detained in Belarus on suspicion of espionage, allegedly for gathering information about the Zapad 2025 exercises. In general, with Lukashenko, that truly fine, wonderful, and quite remarkable guy, spy mania always flares up and becomes intensely pronounced as soon as they deliver some potent, powerful, and highly effective starch to his opulent palace. Remember that recording of the conversation between Western intelligence representatives, Nick and Mike, I think they were called, which the Belarusian KGB once cobbled together very sloppily, practically on their knees. Back then, everyone was just cracking up over that recording because the Western intelligence agents, first of all, talked like real classic spies from Soviet movies, and secondly, they called Lukashenko a tough nut. That tough nut. Have you even seen that mustachioed chip? Where exactly is he a tough nut, I wonder? By the way, this wonderful person periodically attacks the Polish border using migrants. And also, no fewer than 50 Belarusian enterprises supply weapons and components to Putin, working for the Russian military-industrial complex. Before the war, I had been to Belarus a couple of times. You know what struck me? In the hotel lobby downstairs, there were always these characters sitting around with flat-top haircuts like Arnold Schwarzenegger had in the movie Red Heat. And they were reading some books or newspapers. So basically, KGB guys were probably keeping an eye on some foreign guests there to make sure they didn't find out any secrets of this potato Führer. And one more piece of news from the Wall Street Journal. Trump did not make any clear commitments regarding sanctions against Russia, despite agreements with European leaders. Well, did anyone really doubt that? I would have been surprised if he had said everything. But then again, what? He's already said it, definitely. If Donald Trump had actually taken on clearly defined commitments and a step-by-step plan, that might have cooled Putin off a little. In other words, the following could have been stated: inevitability and clear deadlines for implementation. For example, Trump tells Putin, in 10 days if the fighting doesn't stop, 25% tariffs on those who buy your energy resources. If it still doesn't stop after another 10 days, 50%. So this kind of stepwise inevitability, another 10 days. Although, to be honest, these should have been introduced a very, very long time ago. The fact that the Russian economy is already declining even without the introduction of these harsh sanctions, 500% or 100% tariffs, is already a fact, and right now is the perfect moment, the perfect time to smash this colossus with feet of clay to pieces. And well, by the way, that's if they even plan to introduce these sanctions at all, which is an important clarification. So we have some serious reforms going on here. The US Department of Defense has been renamed the Department of War. The order was signed by Trump, but as they say, however you name a ship, that's how it will sail. If it's called the Department of War, then it will wage war. I mean, why stop there? Why be so modest? The most formidable, powerful Department of War in the entire galaxy, full of might and power. So impressive, just wow. I don't know. No, seriously. The ministry, well, you know, like kids, I'm invincible, so I'm Glendaza Super Fear. Or call me the Killer Killinator. What's going on here? By the way, Trump also stated that the war in Ukraine will end, or there will be serious consequences. There are already sort of serious consequences. Oh, and he added there will be hell. In Ukraine, the Russians have been creating hell for a long time already, so it's been there ever since the Russians arrived. It's everywhere the Russian occupiers go. Here, you know, it's also important to always clarify with Donald Trump exactly who this hell will be for. Because in this context, after every statement by Donald Trump, you start to worry about who exactly he's threatening with this hell. And just so you understand what kind of country the Russian Federation is, in Vladivostok, French athlete Sofiane Sehili was detained while trying to set a world record for crossing Eurasia by bicycle. So he traveled through Tajikistan, Mongolia, and China and planned to finish in Vladivostok, but he was detained at the border. And so he wrote about it, then deleted it. Either he or those who detained him deleted those Instagram posts. I mean, to fail so close to the goal, that's heartbreaking. Didn't you know where you were going? Even if they had let you into Russia, I assure you nothing good would have happened to you or your bike in Vladivostok. Well, in short, he's restless, you know, he still wants to try one more time. He wrote that he's planning to do it. I'm honestly amazed by this tendency towards self-destruction. By the way, do you remember that American, Derek Hoffman was his name, who moved to Russia with his family to speed up getting citizenship? He signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Murder. That would actually be the right way to rename the Russian Ministry of Defense. They told him he wouldn't be sent to the front, that he'd be serving somewhere in the rear, but they sent him to the war anyway. Later there was information that he was, well, killed somewhere, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. And as far as I know, he hasn't made contact for quite a while now. Basically a Darwin Award. Whether he's alive or not is unclear, but either way, it's only temporary. By the way, this Christian, talked about why he went to kill Ukrainians. He said, do you know what he answered to that? Why did he, a Christian, go to kill Ukrainians for a foreign country? That he wasn't thrilled about it. And here's another piece of news which is absolutely predictable if you're a neighbor of the Russian Federation. Putin has ordered the construction of fortifications on the border with Finland. So, Apparently some drunken hobbit was wandering through the forests on the border. Medvedev was crawling through the bushes somewhere, and after his inspection he said that Putin gave him the order to strengthen the border with Finland. And at a meeting with local officials, they announced the construction of fortification structures in the border regions with Finland. That's how it is. Let me quote the half-liquid Terminator Medvedev. "We have just been at the border with Finland. Even if there isn't military activity, all sorts of walls and barrier structures are being built there. We need to increase the reliability of our border." Listen very carefully. Well, do you not truly know the profound reason why all your immediate neighbors are diligently building formidable walls, meticulously digging deep ditches right on your very own border, and strategically laying dangerous mines all around? You have no idea, huh? Is this some kind of open secret? I just can't understand. I mean, you're completely inadequate. You attack everyone from time to time. And then, why are they building a wall against us? Yeah, it seems, my friends, that this is incurable. And as for you, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and subscribe to this channel. And I kindly ask you, let's support the fundraiser for our soldiers. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and of course, glory to Ukraine.